The thing about languages is that they don't stay the same. So if you have an English grammar book or an English language book from 10 or 20 years ago, you might find that people speak in a very slightly different way to the way you were taught in that book. So you need refreshing sometimes. And this video is going to help you do that. I'm going to share you some new rules that are coming into the English language and have done over the last 5 or 10 years. But before that, today is a Black Friday. And because of that, I am releasing all of my courses at the lowest possible price just for you watching on YouTube. And this will be between today, November the 21st, and November the 25th. You could get this deal at my website, englishwithrupert.com. There's courses for everyone there on grammar, speaking, writing, vocabulary, IELTS, Cambridge, CAE, C1. There's a course for you there. So go to the description, click on the link to my website, get the deal, but you must do it before November the 25th. Now for these new rules for English. And first of all, gender neutral language. What do I mean by gender neutral language? Well, historically, this person was called a fireman. And in your textbooks, it's quite likely that they will be called a fireman if your textbook is quite old. But if your textbook is up to date, instead this person will be called a firefighter. And that is to recognise that women as well as men can do this job. And this is called gender neutral language. It doesn't favour the man, it doesn't favour the woman. And English has changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years in this way. Here's some examples of some changes. Chairman used to be the name for the person who ran a company, but now it's preferred to say chairperson because some women run companies. Also, if you went on a flight on an airplane, maybe 30 years ago, you might expect to see a woman serving you, and they were called a stewardess. But now we have men and women, so it's more correct to use the word flight attendant. And instead of saying Mrs. or Miss, when you introduce yourself, it's more common just to use MS now. Because some women are married, some women are not married. Women no longer see why they should reveal their marital status when they write a letter or when they introduce themselves. So more and more people use MS. And very recently, some people are trying to make this change happen as well. It's not very widespread at the moment, but it's coming. Watch out for it. And this is when people use they instead of he or she, because they don't know which one to use. So if you hear someone saying they, it may no longer mean many people. It might mean one person, but they're just not revealing whether it's he or she. Something else that happens nowadays that didn't happen before is this. People use academic language to sound more credible. This is when people are trying to explain what they mean in a debate where they have strong feelings about something, and often when they're trying to be critical of the other person. But they use academic sounding language to make them sound like they have more expertise on this matter and they should be listened to more. Rupert, explain. What on earth does that mean? Well, let's try this picture here. This person's looking in the mirror. In the mirror, they see a crown on their head. They think they're very important. And in the past, we may have said this was a proud person or someone who was just very self-centered. But nowadays, there are some people in the world who seem like they want all of the attention from everyone. And when others don't like that, they don't just call them a proud person anymore. They call them a narcissist. A narcissist is someone who is extremely self-centered and wants everything in the world to revolve around them. This word's interesting because it sounds a little bit like nasty or even Nazi. But narcissist doesn't have those meanings. It simply means they're very, very self-centered. But because of the way it sounds, it makes it sound more negative. So it makes that person sound even worse than perhaps they really are. Here's a few other words that do the same thing. Decolonize. This is when you eliminate colonial bias from the past. In the past, lots of global north countries owned vast areas of the world, and they exerted a lot of influence in those areas. Now some people are trying to change things. For example, at universities, sometimes people say decolonize the curriculum. And that means let's stop just having American authors, British authors, European authors in our textbooks. Let's hear the voices from people all over the rest of the world as well. Another word is misogynist. Misogynist means prejudice against women. But because we use this academic sounding word, when you hear it for the first time, you think, I don't know what that means. That sounds really complex. And it's used deliberately in a complex way so that it sounds like the person speaking takes the higher ground. They have a more educated way of putting their ideas across. So if you are critical of someone because they're prejudiced against women and you want to sound like an expert on the matter, like you've got the authority, use misogynist to describe them. Another one is patriarchal. This means male dominance. If you live in a patriarchal society, that's a society where men are dominant. And again, it's used in a negative way. It's used in a way to criticize this society. And we use this really complex academic sounding word to sound more critical and more negative about it. Gaslighting is when someone makes you doubt your own reality. You know something is true, but someone tries to make you think it wasn't, and that's gaslighting. And pathological means extreme negative behaviour. Path is also the root words of some words that have a connection to the word death, which makes it sound even more negative than it would do before. Here's a nicer thing to talk about. Upspeak. What do we mean by upspeak? Well, listen to me say this in two ways. I found the video about new language very interesting. I found the video about new language very interesting. One of them went down on interesting and one of them went up on interesting. Upspeak is when you go up at the end of your statements. Now, in the past, that was criticised as being wrong. And some people will still criticise it today. But it's used more and more frequently in conversations. Why is that? Well, it's to do with the rules of intonation. When you go down at the end of sentences, you're generally indicating to the listener this idea or conversation is closing. This statement is closing. But if you go up, then it indicates to the listener this is still open. Maybe there's a question to answer or the conversation needs to continue. So upspeak is becoming common because it feels more conversational. You're not shutting the conversation down. You're almost giving permission to the person listening to say something else. Or you're going up at the end to highlight the information, to make it sound more interesting. We often go up on words if something is of more interest and you want to make it sound more noteworthy, like this is a piece of news that you've got to hear. I'm going up to indicate it. So when should you do this? Well, if you're giving a presentation or you're trying to be formal, don't use upspeak. That will sound unprofessional and inappropriate. But if you are in conversations and trying to be informal, upspeak is okay. And something else to be more and more aware of in modern day conversation is hedging. Hedging is when you say something to reduce the impact of your statement. Now, it's always been used in formal language, but now it's coming into everyday language more and more because people are striving to be more polite. Perhaps because in the internet age, where we communicate through messaging rather than face-to-face, we need to work harder to be more polite with our messaging. Otherwise people can misunderstand our intentions. So hedging is coming into English language more and more. Let's take the example in the picture here. What do you think about the man on the right? This man looks a bit anxious, a bit worried because he spilt coffee over someone's dress. A simple way of telling someone would be, I spilt coffee over your best dress. Now, if you just say it like that, then the person listening is going to be cross. They'll probably be cross no matter how you say it. But you can add a little bit of hedging just to show that you care a little bit and that you are sorry and that you want to build a bridge with the relationship. Perhaps like this. I kinda spilt coffee over your dress. I kinda. So you're making it sound a little bit less. Kind of means a little bit. Not sure if you like this, but at least by saying something in the beginning, you're appreciating the other person's feelings by saying that. So that can be useful. And it seems like a little coffee got on your dress. Now, saying it like this is really useful because you don't even admit responsibility. You're simply stating that coffee is on the dress, you're not saying it's you, and you're downplaying it. It's only a little. It could really have been a lot. So hedging is something to listen out for, something you could use in your own conversations, or if you're typing messages to someone, to make sure that you're being polite and you keep that relationship going, even if it's by text where you can't get all the information across and you can't clarify things. You have to go over the top with your politeness even more. So those are new rules to follow for English nowadays. And don't forget my Black Friday deal if you're watching this before November the 25th. All my courses at the lowest possible price. Click on the link to my website now, englishwithrupert.com, in the video description.